Doran is a farmer from County Kildare. Donna is a nurse from County Derry. Barry is a peatland ecologist and he's worked with Captain Ni Ciardha from County Clare on a remarkable peat bog rehabilitation. So Dermot's going to start. Dermot, you can take it away, you're most welcome.
Okay, thank you, Ray. I just have something in common with Mary there. She said she came full circle. So I kind of come full circle too, as in I was brought up on a highly intensive dairy farm in County Kildare, and now I'm kind of trying my best to farm in harmony with nature. So in an effort to increase the biodiversity on the farm, I undertook to create a pond, and I picked the wettest part of one field. Now our land it's really good quality land, but as you can see in this photograph here, this is the only piece of land where we have rushes in a corner of a field. So basically I took it upon myself to dig a pond. I've been talking about it long enough, so I said I'd go ahead. So the 15th of January 2017, I hired a local digger, a couple of diggers and drivers to start doing the job. I wanted to create a big pond because I had a couple of species in mind. Like I've always had a fond love for moorhen and coots and stuff like that. So I was hoping I'd dig the pond big enough so they might move in and kind of breed. So there's a couple of photos. Now I'll just show you this. I'll talk about this photograph for a second here. It took 3 days. The pond was dug over 3 years, mainly to keep the price, the costs down, because these diggers are €400 and €500 a day to hire. So doing it over 3 years meant I could pay for it out of my cash flow, out of my current account. So after the first 2 days of digging, I went down. The digger driver went home. I went down to have a look at the progress he made, and that evening there was 6 mallard duck in the pond already. I couldn't believe it, and the omens were good then at that stage. And the digger was parked there one side, the digger driver was gone home, and there were 6 mallard duck moved in. So there's the finished pond. There's a pair of mute swan down there. Now it's fairly substantial. It's about 3/4 of an acre, a little over 3/4 of an acre, and it takes 3 minutes to walk around at normal pace. So it's a fair size of a pond now. So shortly after, in February and March of the first year, 2017, all sorts of species started moving in. A friend of mine rings birds, so he offered to put up a few nets to see could he catch a few ducks and stuff like that. So we caught loads of mallard, we caught loads of teal. They moved in really quickly now. Caught a lovely snipe. So that was the mute swans. Now a pair of mute swans came in 2019. Took a bit of time for them to find the pond. But I was thrilled to see them. And coot moved in 2020, and they're breeding now. They're after producing 2 broods each year since. The mute swans didn't breed the first year because I thought they were young. They seemed juvenile, and they just were flying away, and they'd stay at the pond for maybe a week or two, and then they'd disappear for 6 or 7 weeks and then come back. But the following year, which I think that was 2020, they started to build a nest. There's little grebe. They're breeding in the pond now for the last 3 years. 2 broods a year. They're breeding, so they are. They're beautiful little diving duck. There's the same diving ducks, the little grebes, and that's an emperor dragonfly. That's on the menu. There's one of my favourite little fowl is moorhen, and that's the reason they are the reason I actually dug the pond in the first place. That was 2021. They had 6 cygnets. One of them just didn't make it. I don't know, he just disappeared. But I actually couldn't believe the swans would breed, and that was just amazing. Now, there's little coots again. There's we had a few days desperate bad hard frost, and you can just see they're a pretty heavy bird, and you can see them walking on the ice. There's a hooper swan. He just every year around November, families of hooper swans cross our farm, and they seem to just cross over the pond. And I couldn't believe it when I went down one day. I thought it was a mute swan first, but it actually turned out to be a hooper swan. So he stayed about a week. So I don't know why he just came down, and maybe he was weak or something. Now, I don't know a whole lot about dragonflies and damselflies, but what I do know is they've an amazing ability to find a new pond, because from a greenfield site in 2021 there was 13 species recorded. There's my favourite one. That's a banded demoiselle. There's an emperor dragonfly. Like all the photographs you see here, were taken at the pond. I think that's a blue-tailed damselfly. Not too sure what that one is. There's probably people in the audience know more about it than me do. Now, every year from 2017 on, the frog population has increased steadily. And when you have a lot of frogs in a pond, they're very important for an ecosystem. You know, everything eats frogs. So I couldn't believe. This is a buzzard. Everyone knows that's a buzzard. But I put my trail camera on to the frogs to try and capture them spawning and that. So I couldn't believe when I checked the camera, and this buzzard was stealing the frogs. Then at the same time that the frogs were spawning, I noticed, I just noticed some of the frog spawn was pulled out to the side, away from out to the edge on the walkway, and then I wondered, was there a mink or something pulling it out and eating it? So I set my trail cam up, and this otter showed up. Wow. And that was this year now. I think it's the 20-something of, it's March. The pond is full of stickleback, and they just moved in because they were actually in the water course first. You know, they were in the ditch, and they just moved into the pond. So then, where you have stickleback, hopefully, that's mainly what kingfisher eat. So I've got fantastic footage of, and I've lovely videos of this instance there now. That was only a week ago or two, a couple of weeks ago. So beautiful kingfisher now. So then, there was a lot of other species. There's grey herons and green sandpipers and all sorts of farmland birds take bats and they drink water, and swallows and swifts and stuff like that. But anyhow, sand martins showed up, so I was thrilled with that. So I said to myself, right, I'm going to build a sand martin wall for these. So I built this on the edge of the wall, or edge of the pond, and because I knew sand martins actually take to a man-made structure easy enough. So there's a couple of slides of that. There's a friend of mine, Fergal O'Quinnigan. He's helping me construct it. These are just some photos of construction here.
It's worth probably talking about
this one here.
Dermot,
yeah.
It's not as simple
okay.
as these are quite interesting.
Okay, well, I done a lot of research online because I was aware that San Martin walls were in existence all over Europe, and there's a good few of them in the UK. So I just got all the dimensions I needed off the internet, and I set about building it in 2019. So if you see here, this top row here, these are, I'll show you here, there's the tunnels there, that's the outside of the wall, and then you place another row of the cavity blocks inside, and that forms the chamber. So these are 6 inches here inside, which is perfect. It's perfect for it's adequate room. It's actually too much because sand martins are tiny. Now these tunnels are about between 45 and 50 mil wide. There's the back of it there now. So there's 140 spaces there now for sand martin. and the back of the nests are just blocked off with just a 9x1 plank. So I finished it was finished in March 2019, and we had 2 pairs the first year, and they moved in the end of April. So literally, I actually called them in. You can play a lure, and that'll call them in, you know. So here's fantastic footage I got here. Them chicks are only a day old. Wow. San Martin chicks there. I think they're about 10 days old there now. So here's just a graph of the success here. So 2018 with no San Martin nesting. 2019 with 2, 2020 there's 7, 2021 there's 17, and this year there's 36 pairs. So it's really a good, nice curve to have, isn't it? Now, I hear some people saying, why build a San Martin wall? You know, why do you need to do it? Well, the reason is they're very vulnerable, they're very susceptible to climate change and to fluctuations in the level of rivers. Like, I mean, San Martin, a natural bank that are in a natural setting, they will use banks of a river and that, you know. So if there's a lot of flooding in the summer, their nests can be flooded. And also, they take readily to quarries. This is a quarry. This is what I call a Celtic tiger quarry, and it's literally only in existence about like 15 years, and it's about a kilometre as the crow flies from our wall. And there's a sizable colony there. You know, they took to the sand on the side of the water, but this quarry is after getting permission to be filled in legally, and there's no water there at the moment. It's after being completely filled in this summer. So that is the source. There's where I got my San Martins. You know, so that's why it's so important to you know, to build San Martin walls. Now that's just the final wall. That's it.
Amazing, Dermot.
There you go.
Okay, so my journey to try and improve things for wildlife started whenever I bought this old house here about 22, 23 years ago. The house was in very, very bad state of repair, which was the only reason I could afford it at the time. So basically I camped out at my mum's and tortured her with 3 small children, and came here during the day when they were at school, and the workmen came start to restore the house. So I decided in all my wisdom that I was going to turn it into a wildlife garden. But at that stage I thought that involved going to a garden centre, buying loads of plants, you know, non-native stuff, bringing it all back and putting paths in, mowing lawns, doing all that crack. So much to my joy, I discovered there was a better way. So after I managed to then dig out all the invasives, have lots of sleepless nights, because literally the things I was getting in the garden centre were starting to grow through the whole place, and some of them still haven't got rid of. Discovered that the better way to do it for nature and wildlife would be to actually allow the native flowers to grow and stop mowing the life out of the lawn. So after a few years, well actually the first year we stopped mowing, there was about 10 of these common spotted orchids came up in the lawn, which I was really delighted about. And as time went on, they just became more and more numerous, and we ended up with hundreds of them. So other species were already in the lawn, these cat's ear and different meadowsweet, lots of different things. So it was a great opportunity. I mean, there was an acre of land with it. I planted trees, had a woodland, dug a pond, not just as good as yours. But I also have a quarry nearby with St. Martin's, so I have a great interest in that. So bit of envy going on here. Anyhow, so after that, I got involved in a project with roadside verges, because I realised that our roadside verges were being cut and managed very poorly, and at the wrong times of the year they were cutting for flowers and stuff. So we started a campaign called Don't Mow, Let It Grow with the Causeway Council. And then I also got involved in working with Ulster Wildlife on the Save Our Magnificent Meadows campaign in Fermanagh. So I learned a lot of things from that, and one of the things I learned was, about how beneficial yellow rattle was, about how important it is to take down the nutrient level if you're trying to get a meadow. A lot of ground has a lot of slurry and nitrogen, all sorts of fertilisers put in it, and that's not ideal for wildflowers. Obviously, that favours grass and vigorous species. So ended up then getting a lot of information and then having a real hankering to have more land. So let me see, I'm not even sure what's on this.
Yeah, that's the one then. Yeah.
So this, my dad actually passed away 7 years ago, and he was a farmer. He was a dairy farmer, but he hadn't farmed for a long time himself. So he had always promised he would leave us all a bit of land, each, girls and boys, which was very good of him. So this was my bit of land, which unfortunately, before he did give it to me, a company came round, espousing how amazing it would be for all the useless parts of land that we had if they could have some plantation. And my dad, in his naivety, thought, yeah, we'll plant trees. Donna likes trees, we'll plant some trees. So I now have this is like 6 acres of plantation, which I honestly cannot wait to get rid of, but I have to wait until the term finishes. So with this, when I inherited this, it was from the local intensive farmer who used to rent the land off my dad all the time, and I literally couldn't wait to get him off the land. And I gave him a very short shift, which he wasn't amused about. But anyway, I couldn't wait to get this project started. So when I got it, it had been barley the year before undersowed with ryegrass. So I got a brand new field of ryegrass, which is exactly what I didn't want. But anyway, I got it cut off for silage and got the old yellow rattle. And I went over the field basically just willy-nilly with a little, it was my mum's lawn seed sower. It's all very non-scientific. And I had no idea what bits I'd already spread it or not. I just went through the whole 5 acres and just walked about here, there and everywhere with the yellow rattle. And I thought, this field has been hit with everything. It's had glyphosate for barley, they'd sprayed, I don't know, many times. It had been fertilised, it had been slurried for years. I mean, it was very intensive, that field. And I didn't actually know whether the whole thing would be a success or not, or whether it would take a very long time. But it's a hillside and it's a gravel hill. My dad used to talk about it being a gravel hill. So I thought, well, if the drainage is good and nutrient washes out, it might come good in a few years. But 3 years in, we start to see the beginnings of a few orchid spikes coming up, and I marked them all. I pulled nettles from along here and marked each one I seen, because it was like, oh my God, 3 years in and this field has got orchids. And this is now the 7th year, and I mean, that was from last year, and this year it's looking like it's even going to surpass that. And it's just a sea of flowers. It's absolutely humming. The noise of the bumblebees and hoverflies and butterflies. There's lots of meadow browns and ringlets, all sorts of things. So it's just incredible. And I have to say, it just takes my breath away whenever I go in there. I just think, 7 years. It's not a long time, really. And for me to not have sown anything other than the yellow rattle, basically, and then all this other stuff, it really does give me hope that, you can, even after intensive farming, you can bring stuff back so readily, just if you do the right thing. So it's cut for hay or silage every summer. The whole thing's taken away, baled off, and then a bit of aftermath grazing just with Herefords and Longhorns in the wintertime. Not a lot of grazing, but just enough to keep it, keep the sward down. So that's what we call McNeil's Field, which is the name it had before before we owned it, This here then, this was also another piece of land my dad left me, which used to be his Greyhound Racetrack. So my dad was mental about greyhound racing. So he converted, which was a really lovely piece of land in the past, he converted it maybe about, I don't know, maybe 30, maybe more years ago to a Greyhound Racetrack, much to my horror, because I remembered my childhood. There used to be curlew and lapwing in this area here, and that's all long gone. So once the interest in the dog racing started to fade, this land started to rewild again. And I now just manage that by grazing, basically. So there's just winter grazing, and it's full of all sorts of species, you know. And there's dugout ponds that he had for basically for keeping the bends of the track watered. So that's all now got newts in it and frogs, and ducks come to it as well. You can't see it from there, but it's all around the edges. He just dug them out, and there's a natural spring that's filled up.
No kingfisher, no?
No kingfisher, not yet. So. Then this little bit of land came up, well, it didn't come up for sale, actually, tell a lie. I found out who had bought this. It was an old guy I used to know owned it, and he passed away, and somebody else bought the land, and I realised that whoever the person was that bought the land didn't actually use it for anything. So what happened was, every so often I'd go to see the flowers, and it was being mob grazed by random horses and donkeys belonging to who knows who, I don't know. But basically, sometimes you'd go and it would look like this, and other times you'd go and it was like a bowling green, because they just come in and they would just eat everything out. And they were half starved, they weren't looked after. There's a bog alongside that, and then they would wander into the bog and get stuck, and, you know, all sorts of disasters. So when I approached this guy, he basically said, well, if you give me the same money for it that I paid for it, because it's no good to me. And I couldn't believe my ears, because mostly when you approach people about land where I'm from, they want to know, why do you want it? And they think you want to build it, you know, sell a site off it or build on it or whatever. So there were access issues here, which meant that he knew that it wasn't really anything of value to him, and he couldn't see any value in wildflowers, and he didn't even think it was valuable enough to fence it. So I felt that was really great for me. So bought that. It's nearly 3 acres in total. There's bogwood land, and then there's this bit of really beautiful meadow. So we did fence it, and it's managed by grazing in the winter time with cattle as well. So that's absolutely pollinator heaven. This is Devil's Bit scabious, all the blue. It's absolutely stunning flowers, and then all these cat's ears and hawk's bits, and there's wet areas as well. There's really wet areas. There's like a little wet stream goes down along here, and then it floods out in the winter time. So it's a really precious wee bit of land, I have to say. I love it. And that's it whenever it's at its best, in the end of summer. And this is the cattle going down. So because of the access issues, this is literally a path that we have to we get the cattle to follow us down in. So there's a bucket there. Willie's bringing a bucket, and they're just following down. Really lovely cattle, very gentle. And that's them. It's hard to believe that was the first year. This is our bit of fencing here. We had to carry all this down like quite a distance, because there was no tractors, no machinery around. We had to carry barbed wire, posts, all the equipment to do it. It was a real session, I have to say, getting that fenced, but it's done now. So cattle come in, and they were grazing it. There's a few rushes and things, but I mean, it's a wet land, so it's no big deal. And then finally, last year I was in Donegal on holidays, and I was cycling and discovered this piece of land for sale, which I absolutely fell in love with.
Do they pay nurses more in Northern Ireland?
I actually thought, well, there's no point in me even looking at this. It was 14.5 acres, and I just thought, I thought, at least it's for sale, it's a good excuse to go in and have a nosy. So I did. I went in, had a nosy, and it had been part of a bigger parcel of land, and they'd sold off all the rest of it, and this was the only remaining bit. So it's a coastal hillside, basically, and I thought, well, it's not going to be a pile of use to farmers, and, you know, it's only going to be people like me, hopefully, that'll be interested in it. So started bidding on it, started low. And I actually got it for a bargain. I have to say, I got it for a bargain, but it did blow all my savings. So it's stunning. It's hazelwood. It's all these big rocky outcrops coming through it. There's navelwort everywhere. There's wetwood land. There's mixed species. There's holly and Ryan. There's really good. There's nice oak. And all the adjacent land is really beautiful. So it's part of a bigger package, but, you know, it's not that you're relying on this tiny little bit. And then there's areas of meadow through it, which are really great. And then last autumn, I couldn't believe my eyes. This is Hazel gloves, fungus. Look at this here. It's so funky. Look. So I couldn't believe it. I actually found it, first of all, on blackthorn. So I thought, that can't be hazel gloves because it's not on hazel. And then very shortly afterwards, found it on this bit of hazel. And, like, it is really rare. So western, it'd be a western coast thing. So over at the moon to find that on my land. And then just in the last month found this narrow-bordered bee hawk moth, which is one of the things that feeds on devil's bit scabies. And in the meadows in this, there's lots of devil's bit scabies as well. So this baby is now flying about in this area in Donegal. I was thinking, oh, I can't believe it. And the marsh fertility butterfly. So if somebody had told me last autumn when I was buying this that you might actually have marsh fertility and narrow-bordered bee hawk moth in this land, I would pay twice the money for it and went into debt. And that's it.
Thanks so much.
Is a landowner from kind of southeast County Clare down by Limerick City, and Barry is a peatland ecologist, and they've been working together on this really fascinating project in Shanachile Bog. About 7 or 8 minutes, Barry, and then
Okay, we'll go quick. Yeah. So thanks everyone for coming. So I'm Barry O'Loughlin, this is Catherine, and we had a partnership with the bog going back to 2010. So it was the basis of my master's project. It was where I started out on my career with peatlands. And Catherine had an interest in the bog. So Catherine owns 30 hectares of bog and she owns 10 acres of grassland. And the overall bog of Shanachile, the complex, is 30 hectares in total. So we focused re-wetting and the biodiversity projects on the western side, but we studied it all. So this is us. We're located 2 kilometres north of the University of Limerick in South Clare, and we're 5 kilometres from Limerick City. And our objective was to restore 30 acres of raised bog, putting in peat bunds, peat dams and overflow pipes, create a wildlife pond, manage 10 acres for wildflower meadow creation, install bat boxes, roost boxes, create a nature trail and install a wildlife information board and signage. So we got funding last year from the Department of Agriculture, the locally led EIP scheme for €55,000 to carry out this work. And so we've done all this in our spare time, and it's been a lot of hard work, but it's worth it. So this is just an overview of the site. You can see the purple area here. This is the bog. So we focused on the western side of the bog, 30 acres. The yellow dots here are invasive species, and this is some Himalayan balsam outside the site. Bat roost boxes were going in along tree lines, and then all this yellow area is our wildflower meadow. It's going to be 10 acres. And then we've got bird boxes, then are the orange little bits, and then a wildlife pond only 15 metres by 20 metres. Yeah, yeah. A small pond, nothing compared to and our wildflower meadows, nothing compared to Thomas. But we'll get there. So initially in the summer time last year, there's dead heat on the bog. I mean, it's very hot. So last summer I had to map all these peatland habitats, okay? So this is the entire bog complex. And down to the south we have conifer plantation. And about 12 years ago, a road was meant to go through the bog. So fortunately that didn't happen. So that's why this work is even more important. So the high bog, which is the uncut section, it's this kind of purple hatching, and it's over here as well. And then what I had to do was identify the cutover groups and divide them into 3 sphagnum group categories, which was a methodology I followed by Smith and Crowley 2020. It's just a study that they had done. So the yellow areas are high peat forming groups. We're getting up to 90% sphagnum moss. No targeted interventions because turf cutting has stopped over 40, 50 years ago. So now the bog is healing away. The pink areas is where the sphagnum is around 10 to 40%, and these blue areas is where the sphagnum is less than 10%. But the problem is we've still got functioning drains on the eastern side, so these blue areas are disappearing, and what's happening is bog woodland is taking over dense bracken and scrub, so we're losing our peatland habitat. So one way to stop that is to block the drains. So if we everything go yellow, basically, we want all of it to go into active raised bog. So that's good for sphagnum establishment and then getting carbon sequestration conditions. We want to get the bogs, the water levels up to the bog surface. It has to be within 10 centimetres. So we carried out a report then, one I prepared there, and we're developing a website, and it's a raised bog ecotope and cutover habitat survey. So basically, to cut it short, it's just a representation of all the peat community groups, and this gives us an idea for restoration planning. So we know where the sensitive areas are. Those yellow groups, we want to protect them during the restoration work, which was carried out from October to December last year. So this is what we're working with. This was all bare peat once upon a time, up to 40 years ago, and now it's infilling with sphagnum moss.
So there's 12 indicator species. We need to follow a methodology, and on that methodology by Smith and Crowley and MPWS, they say that if you get your 12 indicator species within a 10 metre by 10 metre quadrat on the high bog, if you get that on the cutover, you're hitting active raised bog. So we have 2.7 hectares of this, which is huge because we're in the geographic range, the western extremity in Clare, for raised bogs in Ireland. So this is, yeah.
Could you just, it might not be obvious for everyone.
Yeah.
Sphagnum.
Oh, sphagnum, okay, yeah, sorry. So this is sphagnum. It's a sphagnum moss. So sphagnum is the main peat forming agent of bogs. So when you look at your turf, or if you see turf, it's black, that's all dead sphagnum. It's all that dead organic matter, and it needs wet conditions to grow. So if the water levels drop due to drainage or turf cutting, if they drop below 30 centimetres, the sphagnum dies off. So in this case, the water levels are up because the local drainage network has broken down in certain parts of the bog. And so what happened is the sphagnum has grown back. So there's good hydrology conditions. But in other parts of the bog, it's degraded, and you'll see that in the high bog. So that's sphagnum. It makes bogs grow, and that's what we're trying to get back onto the bog in those degraded areas. So this is how we do it. We build a bund, which is basically, it's like a berm basically across the bog, and we want to hold water on the bog. So we take this area here, it's called a donor area, it's like a burrow pit, and we take that catatelum peat. So it's catatelum peat, we call it, it's the dark stuff underneath the bog surface, and we use that to build up the bund. So you just excavate a narrow trench, you build up the catatelum peat to build up your bund, and then you attach it with the vegetation on the bog, because that stops the bund eroding. So that's basically what we're doing here. We're pulling it across the bog to hold water in these areas. So this is the peat dam. The peat dam we excavate along a drain. We put the width of a bucket on either side of the peat dam. It's like a lock and key, so it's to secure the peat dam in place. We take the material we want from our burrow pit over here. We swing over the digger into the dam, and we're building up the peat dam. And once we have that catatelum peat, again, we just thatch it with the vegetation. So the result is that you raise your water levels in the drain back up to the surface. And again, all of this is good for getting sphagnum mosses grown again. We want that cover over 50% because that's active raised bog. Anything lower, it's not active, it's degraded. So this is our high bog in June, exactly last year, and you can see there's some excavations on the high bog. You know, it was kind of mangled, kind of a piece of a bog, but you know, it kind of worked in our favour because we could put the peat bunds in these little depressions. So we manipulated, and also it's a really steep slope, which I'll show you. So that's it in June of last year, and then last November we put in the peat bund. So this is our bund going across, and we have it as a semicircle, so it's holding that water in place. And same with this one over here. And then this slopes this direction, so it's like a cascade effect. So the bund functions to hold water on that kind of a steepish slope. We have the water at 20 centimetres, no deeper, because if the water's too deep, the sphagnum won't grow. And we also have to allow for fluctuations in the water table between winter and summer months. So that's kind of what we've done there. And this is it last month. And you can see it's still holding water, but you know, the water levels have even dropped more than that again. So with climate change, we're going to get hotter summers. So we have to future-proof the bog to make sure it's good and wet for those extreme events. So we're praying that it pours out of the heavens. Because, sorry, in South Clare. So this is already, you can see, this is some algae, and also it's the development of what's called Sphagnum cuspidatum. It's the first pioneer sphagnum that you get on raised bogs. So that's already starting, and it's wrapping around the submerged heather shoots there. So this is the cutover in 2021, and this is it then in November. So we put in overflow pipes. They're only temporary, and it's when the water levels rise, they'll move on to the next chamber and the next chamber. So this is one chamber, this is another chamber, that's another chamber. And the water moves with the gravity, with the slope. We don't, as I said before, we don't want the water too deep, the sphagnum won't grow. So that's what the purpose of the pipes. But when this all fills up with sphagnum, we'll remove the pipes. And that's just an aerial of the high bog in February 2022. So it's all wet. It would have been all completely dry. And again, we want to get the sphagnum, which is less than 10%, right up to 50, 60, 70% if we can. So another action that we've done is we've dug a wildlife pond. It's very small. It's 50. it's 50 meters by 12 meters. But it's just Catherine's grassland just to the west of the bog. And so we built this stone hibernacula for smooth newt. And one of the issues I think we had was we had peat and we had clay, but we were worried there was a bit of sand. Even though it was holding water in winter, we were afraid that it would dry out. So we had to put in a geoline in, which we would have preferred not to, but we had to. And then we backfilled that with earthen material then. And basically then this was it then at the end of the process. And then in December, this is Kate O'Loughlin, myself and Catherine, we dug out, we transplanted reed mace then into, just as a trial to see would it take off. So we would prefer natural colonisation as much as possible, but we said we'd try the reed mace and see how it gets on. And then with the common reeds, we said that would spread too much. So then this is it then last month, and you can see the reeds are starting to take off again, and we'd hope that this would be used in time. Once it matures, it'll be used by water rail and reed bunting and maybe mallard as well. Another thing was invasive species, eradication. We had 6 stands of rhododendron and we had Himalayan balsam along the local road. But it wasn't too bad, like we'd only 6 stands of rhododendron, but we wanted to catch it before it got worse. So we commissioned an invasive species management plan and a company to prepare that for us. And you can see the red dots are the rhododendron. So the first work started in last August, and they've just done the hand pulling of the Himalayan balsam last month. So that's good anyway, that's on the right trajectory. And then one of the things on Catherine's land, she's got these great mature oak tree lines. So they connect to the bog woodland and to the bog itself. So it's a great wildlife corridor to link all these species. And we have bog woodland then as well. It's not Annex 1, but it's secondary regenerating bog woodland. So it's coming in at the expense of the peat, but it's still a great feature for birds and wildlife. So we put in over 30 nest boxes for different specialist species. So we've barn owl, kestrel, we have woodcock there as well, which is a red listed species, metapipit. But some of these boxes are also to attract great spotted woodpecker. We have tree creepers there as well. And barn owl, we had Alan McCarthy of Birdwatch Ireland help us with the barn owl nest box last week. So that's something that we targeted in the tree lines in the bog woodland. And following the restoration of the bog and the wildlife pond, we'd hope to definitely see enhancement for maybe potentially curlew, snipe, barn owl, great spotted woodpecker, kestrel, tree creeper and water rail. And we put in over 20 bat roost boxes then targeted on tree lines as well within the site. And we're commissioning a bat survey now next month, and he's going to put out SM2 static detectors and carry out an inventory of that. And this is our wildflower meadow. It was covered in bracken. Yeah, it was. It's really pain, really, because we cut it there last August, and we did it in late August because that's good for seed setting for wildflowers as well, to enhance that. And we've increased the stocking regime. There's ponies there as well.
Ponies,
yeah. So we're keeping an eye on that. But we've got these open areas. We think that if we plant these maybe under the native woodland scheme, it will outshade the bracken and stop it encroaching into the field, combined with managing the stocking levels as well. And then we've got lots of wildflowers. We've got common spotted orchid, we've got hawksbeard, we've got red bartzia, eyebright, and again it's linking in then with the All Ireland Pollinator Plan. And I suppose once it's all done, then we're going to link in with the University of Limerick then to quantify the net carbon balance of the restored bog then, and we'll do that maybe over a 5-year period, and it'll tell us what's happening with the sequestration process. So that's
so much, Barry. Meadows generally done like what in terms of what you observe around the countryside. I'm talking about traditional old wildflower meadows. Are they doing well, or are they under pressure? How do you find their state to be?
Well, where we live, I've witnessed since I moved to where I live now at the minute in that house, I have witnessed the destruction of almost all the wildflower meadows in the whole area around where I am. the quarry across from us has annihilated all the meadows, which were quality meadows. They've sold off, private landowners have sold off for buildings, so they've all been lost, those meadows, and then drainage or reseeding. So even in Donegal, I was in Donegal last week, and again I saw a really quality old meadow. It was deep ploughed, drains put in, sowed in grass seed and fertiliser, and I just went, it was like peat, it was like deep peat and limestone, and it literally is just, it's now like this tiny beard of grass on it. It would make you cry, it's horrendous. Yeah. So
you see like an intensification on one side to like agriculture, and then afforestation on the other side.
That's
that's
right,
kind
yeah.
of being eaten from either side.
yeah.
You might say the same about like maybe talking about birds is too broad a question, Dermot, like, but maybe focus on waders, like in Ireland, like give us a state of the nation.
Well, it's funny you should mention waders now, because they're in serious trouble. The vast majority of breeding waders are in deep decline in Ireland and across Europe. You know, they're really in need of major
Projects like Barry's.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Even snipe there now they're in serious trouble. A lot of them are on the red list now.
Yeah. Peatlands generally, Barry, I know a lot of them have been afforested and whatever, so that, like, it's hard to see them coming back from that, but like, are things looking a lot better than they were 10 years ago with peatlands in Ireland? As in, I know there's a lot of activity and talk around restoring them, or is it only really marginal? I saw there was some project in Wicklow and it was supported by a big multinational, but when you looked into the details it was just 60 hectares, and there's hundreds of thousands of hectares of these degraded peatlands around.
Yeah, well, I mean, I suppose, look, there's the Wild Atlantic Nature Project that Derek McLaughlin is spearheading on the west, but I suppose EIP projects only do so much, and they cover, discrete geographic locations, but I mean, it would be great to see it in the next CAP where, farmers would have that more option, to block drains, because they have this idle ground with open drains, there's a corporation teams under the agri-environmental climate measures, so maybe potentially that's a way, but at the moment their overall trend is deteriorating, and the conservation status is bad. So that's the latest.
It's quite a problem from a climate point of view, because they is it something like 6 tonnes per hectare per year, a kind of a degraded bog will release in carbon just by not being rehabilitated. Is that figure correct?
Well, I suppose every bog is different, and the conditions are bog. We always say every bog is different. But definitely, if you've open drains and the water table is below 30 centimetres, what happens is the peat is oxidised, and so there's bacteria in that soil, and they're breaking down the peat, and they're releasing all that carbon as a byproduct. I know that in my Arwood that they compared it, Florence Rennie Wilson and David, UCD, it was an EPA funded research project, and they found that compared to a re-wetted section of my Arwood bog, 0.67 hectares was being sequestered, whereas the drain section was emitting over 1.75 tonnes per hectare. But it is emitting, yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Thanks to you three. You four, you've been amazing.